What would happen if there was a positive case in the classroom?
That child is removed from the classroom and goes through their quarantine period. The other children in the classroom are now identified as close contacts. If they have their masks on throughout the day, they can qualify for a modified quarantine. What does this mean? This means that they get to keep coming to school, but they are excluded from any other activities. And these activities include any kind of after-school program, any kind of clubs that they might go to, language clubs, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, any family activities also. And that quarantine lasts for 10 days from the last exposure that the children had from the case.
What happens when a student who is identified as positive or the close contact were unmasked during the exposure?
In that situation, the child who is unmasked does not qualify for a modified quarantine. It is a full quarantine where that child that was unmasked needs to stay at home for 10 days. They can shorten that quarantine if they test negative on or after day 5. If they test negative, they can return to school and to their other activities on day 8 after their exposure.
Why do students at lunchtime qualify for modified quarantine?
When we look that lunchtime is for 20 minutes at a given school, we think, oh my goodness, then obviously they qualify for the full quarantine and not for modified quarantine. But we have to take some things into account. We have to take into account the actual time it takes for that child to walk from the classroom to the cafeteria, the time it takes that child to walk through the cafeteria line, the time it takes for that child to walk from the cafeteria now to the picnic table. At this time, they're taking their masks off. They're eating their lunch. Yard duty is walking around and gently giving reminders to students to put their masks back on after they're done eating while they're waiting to be dismissed. So now we have taken this 20 minutes and shortened it down to maybe 10 minutes or even less. So in that scenario, they do qualify for the modified quarantine as opposed to the full.
Can you explain the quarantine timeline?
For clarification, the day of the event, the day of the exposure, is counted as day 0. The following day is day 1. With modified quarantine, remember you need to be tested negative on or after day 5. Your quarantine will be shortened to day 7, and that means you get to return to your activities on day 8.
How does instruction continue when there is a quarantine in the classroom?
Should a student be quarantined, if they are too ill to do work, then they should be just resting and not worrying about the work. When they return to school, then the teacher would provide them with makeup work, as outlined in one of our board policies, where they would be able to have enough time upon their return to complete that work and have it graded into the grade book. If they are well enough and are just at home quarantining, they can then do a couple of things. They can request access to the Google Classroom or to Seesaw if they're some of our younger students, and they can continue working on the work that is provided within Google Classroom or Seesaw. Or some sites will be providing packets that they can pick up upon request, as we always do normally when students are out. So they can come to school, pick up a packet, and then continue their work as they're quarantined. When they return, they still have time to complete that work in order to turn it in for credit.
What happens when a classroom is partially or fully quarantined?
If a classroom is partially or fully quarantined, which is less likely to happen at this point, we do have a protocol in place. So should a classroom be partially or completely shut down, our teachers have prepared for that and will be continuing to prepare for that with some lesson plans ready to go for students. Some of those lesson assignments and plans have been created in Google Classroom or in Seesaw, and some have been prepared as packets so that parents can pick them up and have students work on them. I think sometimes we will have a teacher return first with some students, and some students are still at home. So we do have a protocol for that so that students at home can continue working and students at school with their teacher can continue having instruction. And at the same time, we might have some students return and some students at home and the teacher still at home waiting for test results. And so in that instance, a sub would be provided in the classroom. The teacher can still teach from home and everyone can join them on their Google Meet or Zoom or through Seesaw activities.